Today, we have the pleasure of being with Sarah Curnoles, a life coach and speaker who is passionate about helping women reclaim their power. Using a combination of compassion and tough love, she guides women to heal after their heartbreak and turn their breakups into the best things ever to happen. Sarah is the host of the podcast Breakup Detox and the creator of a program, Forget Your Ex in 10 Days. Previously, Sarah worked as a production manager and a stage manager in a professional theater for nearly 15 years, where she managed over 30 productions. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm so glad we could have this conversation. I think it'll be really applicable. So let's get started. Why do we find ourselves often dwelling on past relationships? That's obviously why you made the course.
Yeah. I find that people, I don't know, you and I have talked about dating and relationships a lot, right? And what was happening for me and what I see happen for a lot of my clients is that they get really stuck on what went wrong, and they try to solve like what went wrong in that relationship so that I don't repeat it again and I don't end up in the same kind of pain. But I find it's the wrong question to be asking. And if we ask a better question, we can actually learn and grow from it and apply it to our future, whether it's a future relationship or, I'm personally in a period of time where I'm not dating right now. So I get to really just sort of be with myself and kind of date myself. And I'm applying what I learned in relationships to how do I create the best life possible for myself. So that's how I'm applying it. But we get stuck because I think we're asking a bad question.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? It's the first way I've worded it that way. It's interesting.
I love it. So what would be the right question to ask?
Yeah.
Other than that.
I help people. One of the things that I do differently and why I'm able to do it so quickly in 10 days with people in my program is that I look at what did I like about the relationship and what did I like about myself in that relationship? Because there's something you liked about yourself in that relationship. There was something that was working for you, otherwise you wouldn't have stayed, right? So I look at that part, and then we look at what did I not like about that relationship, and what did I not like about myself in that relationship.
That's really good.
Right, because we want to take the good stuff and show you that it's repeatable. You can find that in another future partner. You can find that in another relationship. And also, you always want to be showing up as your best in a relationship, right? We want those relationships where you are your best self and you have this opportunity to grow for years and years and years, hopefully. And if we can learn of like, what was it in that relationship that I liked about myself, then you can also replicate that or expand on it.
Love it.
And then we also want to take accountability for the parts of like, well, I wasn't showing up my best, or it didn't bring out my best. And why didn't that relationship bring out your best? And what do you never want to repeat again in a future relationship? What were the things you didn't like that you don't ever want to experience again? And who do you have to be so that you no longer are attracting that kind of a partner?
I think that's huge. Who do we have to be? Because I talk a lot about the kind girl bullseye. So let's talk about that. How overly kind versus empowered kind, and what kind of person we're going to be attracting and how we're going to show up.
Yeah. And when you say overly kind, I think about that as meaning I'm being kind at the expense of myself.
Yes. That's exactly what I'm meaning.
Yeah. And when we put it that way, I think that puts a lot into perspective. I think about women in my mom's generation where they were taught to be that kind of overly kind, where it was put everybody first and you come last.
Yes.
And I see her now still in those patterns, and I see how exhausted she is and how infrequently she gets to actually just like sit back and enjoy. Whereas she's just kind of like up and she's taking care of everybody and she's over functioning. And I got so into the story. I'm sorry. Repeat the question again. I got excited about this topic of like overly kindness because it's a pattern for me too. I'm healing it too. And it shows up in relationships, right? In that way of like, I don't want to repeat that again. I don't want to be losing myself in a relationship. I want to be true to myself.
And who are we attracting? Like when we're overly kind versus empowered kind and all how what could you say about that?
Yeah. When you're overly kind, I think this is where we start dipping into more of those narcissistic relationships, right? And overly kind reminds me of almost those codependent patterns, right?
Yeah.
Where you are being so kind and you are losing yourself because you're trying to control the situation so that you get the kind of relationship that you want and the kind of validation that you're looking for. And I'm not saying any of this with judgment. I'm sure like your audience is probably a lot like mine, and we are probably dipping in those codependent patterns. I am also a healing codependent. So I say all of this having lived all of it, having gone through it, and I'm still working on it myself. But when you're being overly kind, you attract a partner who is expecting that and who may not be returning it because a relationship is always going to be give and take, but if you are doing all the giving, then they get to do all the taking.
What a deal. So what about then empowered kindness? When you're
Empowered kindness, yeah.
empowered kind, how does that affect who we're attracting?
Yeah,
And how
and I loved that phrase that you're using of empowered kindness. That really stuck with me because when I first start working with people and we start talking about those codependent patterns of stop overexerting yourself, they're like, but that's just how I show people that I love them. That's just love. Like that's what you're supposed to do. And if you think about empowered kindness is coming from a place of I'm giving because I have extra to give. I'm not giving my all. I'm not giving to the point where I have lost touch with what I actually want. I'm an empowered kindness is giving from a place of like, I've checked in with myself, I'm good, and now I have more to give.
And I think with receiving too, I think, if we're being overly kind, we also have a hard time receiving. So empowered kindness is what you spoke about too, the more give and take, where it's more balanced rather than bi-direction,
Yeah.
one directional.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
so true. So how do you detox from a relationship?
Yeah, this is the framework that I take everybody through is sort of a breakup detox is what I've been calling it because we don't want to be carrying our baggage from our past relationships into our future relationships, right? We want to come having learned our lessons and but also come with a clean slate. Somebody was just telling me the other day they feel like they are atoning for their sins of their partner's ex. And I was like, "Oh
Yeah,
no."
yeah. I feel like that's so true when we haven't done our work or they haven't done their work.
Right. Like, I think that their partner had been cheated on in their last relationship, and now she was having to answer for that of like she was being overly questioned and um she's like, I haven't even done anything wrong. And I said, no, you haven't. And that's somebody who hasn't done a detox because they're still carrying all of that with them.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that we detox, I look at it in 4 stages. There's a physical detox where we look at your physical environment of like what are the things that are in your physical environment that remind you of your ex that we need to put away for a period of time so that you don't have those triggers. I do a mental detox, which is the part that probably takes the longest because you're literally rewiring your brain. You've spent your entire relationship thinking about this person and it does take a little bit of time and some concentrated effort, but we want your mind to be more focused on you than it is on them.
Mm, that's great.
And yes, and that's the big part of the detox. Like I recenter you in your life instead of you sharing the spotlight with your former partner. So it's just about you now. Um, and then we do an emotional detox where we go through how do you how do you go through and actually feel your emotions instead of avoiding them or stuffing them down or numbing them or skipping over them. So I have a whole process to help people actually feel their emotions and feel safe doing that, because I don't know about you, anger was not a safe emotion in my household growing up. So I had to come to terms with it's okay to be angry. Maybe just don't, become a dragon and yell and bite people's heads off, but there's a safe way to go through anger. And the fourth pillar is a social detox, because our relationship, one, like that is a major social connection. It's probably your best friend. It's the person you celebrate things with and that you go through your hard days with. And maybe it's the person you text just randomly throughout the day. So we need a new social connection point for a lot of those factors. But also, our social network of friends also really changes after a breakup. Sometimes we lose entire friend groups and we need to rebuild that. So, we have a detox of your social life where we clear out anything that's not serving you and we find new healthy social connections so that that gets rebuilt.
That's huge. How long does this process take typically? I know it's individual, but tell
It
me more.
is individual. So the whole process can take 3 to 6 months, really depending on how much you focus on it. And I do forget your ex in 10 days, where it feels like I help you lift the burden of always thinking about your ex and being obsessed, and giving you back that freedom. And then you can really go through a full process of the detox.
Mhm. Is it better during that time when you're detoxing to be in relationship, or are you more like you mentioned dating ourselves? Like tell me more about.
Yeah. I am not a fan of hard and fast rules. However, I will say it does make it a lot easier if you are not trying to jump into a relationship while you're detoxing from another one. It is a lot easier to do it if you're single and you can just purely focus on yourself, which is really reestablishing, I should say, reestablishing that healthy relationship with yourself.
Or sometimes just establishing.
That's a good point. Like, right?
Our emotional cups can get full without us really even being aware of it. But when our emotional cups get full, we can react rather than respond. We can be fatigued. We can feel burdened. We have struggle with sleep. We can have physical symptoms. And that's why I have the free barf notebook page for you. And it's a simple process done regularly where you're barfing out your thoughts, sorting them out, and planning them out. And it's a wealth of healing in that. So go ahead and check the link and have access to that free barf notebook process. Live brighter every day.
Yes.
Yes. Speaking of establishing a relationship with ourselves, what does dating ourselves look like? What does that mean?
When I'm dating myself, or if my client is going through a period where they're dating themselves, I used to think that was so cheesy. I remember I was assigned that once in a program of like, take yourself on a date. And I was like, this is so lame. Of like, I'm gonna get dressed up and I'm gonna go to dinner by myself and have a glass of wine by myself. And it was really awkward at first. But really, what I think it means is prioritizing that relationship with yourself as if you were dating yourself. Get to know yourself. What do you like? What do you not like? And it might be awkward at first because, like you said, maybe you haven't had a relationship with yourself before, and this is the first time you've ever prioritized yourself in that way. But now I will tell you, it's my favorite thing. Taking myself to the movies, the first time I did it was a huge deal, and I hated it. But now I love going to the movies by myself. I love going to a restaurant or going to a bookstore and finding, like, what's the thing that's going to delight me today? And that's how I see dating yourself, like finding out, how do I want to delight myself today?
I love that. Tapping into our delight. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. So, how does, you talked about how the social connection after a relationship, how does having female relationships or male or whatever, but having a nice social basis even while we're dating? Because I have some friends that it's like as soon as they have a guy, girlfriends are gone. And I understand there is a time and you only have so many time and energy and resources. But how can that having a healthy social network outside of the relationship be helpful?
It's helpful in so many ways. Like that's such a big question on so many levels because I find our friends are often a better judge of the people that we're dating, and we introduce those people too late. I am a big fan of bring around that new guy, that new gal that you're dating, bring them around your friends early
Mm-hmm.
because you are in sort of a love bubble in those first early dates and you kind of overlook a lot of potential red flags and your friends are going to tell you like it is. I think my best friends are the ones who know me better than I know myself sometimes, and they keep my relationship to myself strong, but they also keep me grounded. They keep me honest because they're going to call me on my stuff if I'm, if I'm acting weird or different, they're going to call me out on it. And what it also does, keeping those social connections while you're dating somebody, it's it's having other outlets for other important connections instead of concentrating it all on one person. And I find that's something that I don't know, our society, our culture places all this importance on the one, that one person that we're going to spend all of our time with. And so then they become our source for everything. Our source for sex, our source for love, our source for friendship, our source for family, of, doing the household chores, raising kids, all of it becomes centralized on this one person. And it's almost like I actually used to work in a finance background and I just thought about like it's like stocks. Like you don't want all of your money in one stock because what happens if that stock changes and it goes down? You want to diversify your options, right? You want to have different kinds of friendships and different ways of relating to people and you know, that friend that you can go to the rom-com with and that friend that you can go to the fancy restaurant with, and it doesn't all have to be your romantic partner.
I think it takes some of the burden off. I'll tell you, I introduced Mike right away to. I have a couple girlfriends that are more discerning. I got
Mm-hmm.
more discerning, and I made sure because, like you talked about the love bubble, I made sure that they met him right away because I'm like, I know that they're a good judge of character and they can see things I can't. And one of those people in my life is my daughter Tia. She can look through people, and boy, she calls a spade a spade. So it was really interesting to see her view of Mike and what my friends thought. But he definitely passed the friend test.
I
So
would say I hope he did, if he's made it this far.
yeah, but I really did prioritize that because I'm like, I have some friends that are really discerning, and I'm gonna, benefit from that. So I did take advantage of that. That was super helpful. So
Yeah. Yeah,
oh
I didn't. I never did. And I regret it because there are a few that they told me afterwards. They're like, when I met him, I was not sure about that guy, but you really liked him, so I went with it.
yeah. Yeah, that is great. Well, I love that because I think all of us want to recover from our exes and not bring the baggage into a new relationship so that we can actually grow and show up better. So I love that you have a program and you focus on that. What do you do to live brighter? I always talk about living brighter every day. What are some practice you do to just live your brightest?
My sleep is my number one priority. So I
I love
always make sure I go to bed early. If I don't get my sleep, I am a nightmare. And um, I literally feel dull, not as in uninteresting, but as in not shiny, not bright.
it.
Um, and I just don't feel like I'm at my best. So I have to take care of my sleep and movement. My movement practice is also a non-negotiable. because there's something I think I tap into. Even if it's just going for a walk, it always raises my mood. And I am somebody, I like a little bit of a physical challenge. So I like lifting weights. And so pushing myself in a little bit in the gym, um, it gives me that feeling of like, yeah, I did it. Go me. I'm strong. And that really helps me.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. And how can people connect with you?
Yeah, I love connecting to people on Instagram, which is just my name. It's at Sarah Curnoles.
How do you spell
I also, yeah,
it?
yes. So it's at SarahCurnoles. And I'm sure we could put it in notes
Yeah,
also.
we
Okay,
will.
great. I also have a website where you can download. I have lots of free things, but I think right now what I'd love to offer your group is some journal prompts. So anybody who's going through a breakup, or even if it's not right after a breakup and you're going through a single period and you just really want to make sure your system's clear of your ex, these are my best journal prompts. And you can get that at www.top10journalprompts.com.
Love it. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you,
Yeah,
Sarah. I appreciate you.
absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.
Stay tuned for our next episode.